Are you really attracting horrible relationships, or is something else going on? It's often said that those who have gone through abusive relationships or abusive upbringings tend to attract similar relationships because that's what's familiar to them. Now, I do agree that we can become habituated, but it's not so much that we are attracting or calling in the same kinds of relationships. It's actually more so that the way that we have learned to survive what we've been through, our nervous systems are essentially sculpted to withstand a level of mistreatment that maybe someone who is in healthy dynamics, they are able to quickly pick up on, oh no, I don't like that. I don't want that. I deserve better than that. But our nervous systems get so sculpted to either, I know this is what happened to me for quite a while, is I would usually just kind of glaze over. I would pick up on things, but I would glaze over the red flags. I would glaze over the off feelings and quickly try to make myself feel comfortable again, because as a survivor of scapegoat abuse, I didn't feel comfortable calling it out. I was so used to finding fault in myself rather than allowing myself to critique or find fault in others. And without that ability to judge and really discern effectively, that means you allow anyone and anything, right? And so it's not an effective way to live. And so it's not so much I was attracting these people in, and you may relate to this. You're not, crafting a vision board and like, gosh, you know what I want in my life. It's not so much that you're attracting them in, it's more so that you're acclimated to a certain temperature. You're acclimated to a certain temperature. You have been, navigating these relationships by editing yourself in such a way that you can survive. And so your nervous system is more compatible to an abuser who's looking for someone who will stick around through the abuse, or even someone who has just one insecurity or what have you that they can pick at, because they will go after everyone, right? It's not just that history of past abuse that makes you culpable. It's actually any kind of insecurity or just even a unawareness of the different tactics or ways that people can be manipulated. And so, hi, I'm Unique Val, and I'm a certified intimacy coach, and I'm also a spiritual guide. I'm here to help you heal, access your deeper self, and experience soul deep love. And so in this video, I wanted to talk about some of the dating traumas that we actually could not have prevented, even with all of the psychological research and knowledge, right? With all of the information, even if you logically knew better, because of your wiring and your conditioning, it is just something that you have to go through and notice within yourself how you have been shaped to accept this behavior, right? And it's something that even if your mind will still get stuck in this. So I know there's so much shame and guilt around, oh, I should have caught it, right? Or maybe you're a healer or a coach or a therapist, or you're just someone who you consider yourself pretty knowledgeable about the world, right? And sly, manipulative people. And then you're like, well, how did I end up like this? How did I end up in this situation? And so I want to relieve some of that guilting and shaming that we can do internally, because it really is not as preventable as I feel a lot of people who haven't been through this think that it is. And at the end of this video, I want to also address that feeling of hopelessness that we can get when it comes to relationships, dating, and even just friendships when we have gone through these experiences again and again. And what I personally want to invite you to is a state of surrendering to that hopelessness. And that can sound intimidating and like, that sounds like backward backwards advice, but I promise, trust me, there might be a little gem in this practice for you. Okay, so the dating trauma that you couldn't have prevented. Number one is the slow drip of poor treatment and disrespect over time that maybe started small and then built and built and built. So this kind of progressive poor treatment, or this progressive kind of abuse that comes in, it trickles in maybe in like an off comment or a side eye or a weird look, and you're like, did I see that? What was that? It throws you off guard. This is especially psychologically damaging because it usually starts with a lot of intense affection, intense desire, love bombing, and praise. And so in the midst of this oasis of pleasurable experiences, that one drop of toxicity, it feels out of place. And so what happens internally is we question ourselves instead of questioning the other person. Now, avoiding a person like this, someone who is largely very pleasing, but then there is that kind of flicker. It's so fast sometimes. Avoiding this kind of person is almost impossible for those of us who have been around people like that. For those of us who've had to excuse that behavior, or who have been taught that they should always see the good in people. Ultimately, there is a core good. And so anything else that you're seeing, that's something wrong with you. So either if you've been conditioned, whether that's through your religion, your culture, just your family dynamics, maybe you come from a family that tends to people please and just wants to put on a happy face all the time, right? And so you learn to wear masks, but you also learn to take the mask for reality rather than what you're picking up underneath the mask. You're not trusting that, like, there's something beneath that. Then it becomes really hard to not fall victim to this kind of abuse that starts out very slow, incremental, and is actually very psychologically damaging. And so if you were raised or have been in an environment where you have had to excuse harm, especially since childhood, if you've been raised in that environment where you had to make excuses for harmful people and harmful behavior and could not get away from them because as a child you absolutely could not, then it's not that you mean to glaze over these warning signs. It's not that you mean to ignore when the hairs on the back of your neck start to prick up. It's just that you have done it for so long in order to stay in community that it starts to feel like the price of community. Like, yeah, I noticed that, but you don't say anything about it. You can't say anything to that person, right? I have to just continue to play along and perceive this person as safe because this is what I have. This is all I have. And so even if in adulthood, you know, this isn't all you have, there is such a kind of scarcity around relationships and like a fear around it that you can't on a deep level acknowledge that I actually have the freedom to just walk away and find safe people. It gets so ingrained in your story about the world that in this way it almost feels like we're attracting it, in the sense that this becomes the story that we're living in, right? That relationships are kind of hard to come by and you kind of have to hold tightly instead of allowing yourself to assess every step of the way, every single year, every single, phase of the relationship. You get to assess, is this still working for me? Is this still a safe relationship for me? Is this still a place where I thrive? And this also speaks to how we talk about relationships in general in our society, which can build up this awful expectation that relationships and friendships are supposed to last forever. And that simply isn't true. And so when we notice that our relationship is becoming harmful or we're just not connecting in the same way, we can tend to guilt and shame ourselves instead of acknowledging it as just a natural cycle, a natural occurrences. There's plenty of new connections that I can make. I don't have to buy so deeply into the story that making friendships in adulthood is so hard, right? What if I established a new story? What if I actually chose how I wanted to see the world and chose how much I wanted to put effort into making new connections? But when we're coming from that childhood trauma that's then creating adulthood trauma, our vision is so kind of pin focused, and we aren't able to see beyond that old reality, that fearful state that says, I kind of got to cling to whatever love that I can get, because I don't know if I'll get any more or if it'll get any better than this. And in this state of mind, a bad relationship is better than no relationship. And one of the signs, at least I notice for me, that I know I'm healing is I now recognize that no relationship is better than a bad relationship. I'd rather have no relationship and work on making new relationships than be in a bad relationship. And that is actually an awareness, a shift that surrendering to that feeling of hopelessness can actually get you to, which seems a little bit contradictory or like a negative experience to have, but it's actually the beginning of your healing and the beginning of you choosing something new. Okay, the next kind of dating trauma that I don't think you could have prevented. Number 2, this I kind of group into playing it cool in dating, but it's actually, I feel like, our contemporary version of that, because I feel like playing it cool in dating is more so 2000s to 2010s. But what I notice now in the 2020s, is there's this kind of Olympics around being the most healed person and the most emotionally secure person. And so even before we are that, people are trying to be that, right? And there's this knowing that we're all a little bit more emotionally intelligent. We're all a little bit, not all of us, but hopefully you're looking for dates if you are an empath, or you consider yourself someone who's been working on themselves, or you're healing. You're looking for someone who's also doing the work. And where I notice the kind of new cool girl energy coming in, or cool guy energy, whatever, coming in, is this desire to be the most emotionally secure person, to the point that you are unintentionally putting up or explaining away abusive behavior. Things like when a partner starts to devalue or even degrade you in front of friends, say harmful things because other people are laughing it off, and you're like, yeah, I can laugh it off. I have the security within myself to not be offended by that. Like, look at me, I'm so emotionally secure. I don't have to be offended by that. Yeah, he can say whatever he wants. Sure, they can be flirty with someone else. That's totally fine, even though that's kind of outside of the agreement that you have with your person. It's one thing if you're polyamorous, but if you're not, you're so much trying to be the most emotionally secure, the most securely attached, the most healthiest person, that you are excusing poor behavior or even psychologizing them and being like, oh, well, they only do that because of this wound, or, oh, but this happened in their childhood and this is why they're presenting that way, and oh, it's maybe because of this, and oh. And yes, when we're in relationship, we want to understand where our person is coming from. It's completely part of the exchange of love and care is to acknowledge, oh, they really struggle with that, and how can I support you in your recovery? How can I support you in helping you feel supported and help you know that you can come to me in the relationship and we can talk it out, right? All of that is good, but oftentimes it's being done when the other person isn't saying that they're working on that. We're usually projecting that story, and we're projecting that, and it becomes an easy crutch for the other person to fall on and say, well, I blah 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 blah, that da 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 da, and I don't need to work on this because this is just how it is for me, da 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 da. And so this need to be the most emotionally secure, stable, what have you, is often born from a desire to perform and to be perfect in the relationship. We're so afraid of being abandoned or cast out or rejected that we feel we need to show up perfectly. Only the other person gets to be flawed, and you must be this perfectly stable person. Your desire to be picked then overrides your desire to be emotionally and soulfully met in your relationship. And so if you've had a fear of abandonment, or you've been abandoned in your life, it can be really hard not to fall back into this pattern, because you usually, similar to the first example, you are shaped in such a way, your nervous system has been shaped in such a way to, how can I adjust myself, instead of, is this the right fit for me? How can I adjust myself to make this work, instead of, does this actually fit in with what I want? And so the adjustment that you have learned to make is to excuse degrading comments or toxic comparisons, or just essentially excuse any of what the other person is doing, and just out of compassion or empathy try to see them in the best light and be the emotionally secure person who isn't offended. You have had to make these adjustments in order to not go through the pain of being abandoned. But when you get stuck in this mindset of wanting to be chosen and picked, then it becomes really hard to see when you're clinging to something that isn't worth keeping. For you, the challenge is encountering that deep fear that I'm not chosen. This person does not choose me. And at first, that can bring on an overwhelming amount of fear, a deep sense of nothingness, feeling empty and isolated and alone. But within the darkness, we often start to sense our own inner light. And that can sound really cheesy, but I promise you it happens. This is a process of healing for you, surrendering to the hopelessness in your heart. It actually will bring you into great intimacy with yourself. And from this place, you begin to choose you, and in turn, you begin to choose others who choose you. You realize that safety comes in relationship not from just anybody. Not everyone is worthy of that depth of relating, and you don't have a responsibility to make those who are not choosing you feel chosen. Just because that's a trauma you went through, you actually don't owe it to everyone else to then make the world feel like welcomed and chosen. You actually owe it to yourself when you start to choose you to go and seek out those places where you are wildly loved, where there is no question in your mind that this person wants you around, values you, and will make an effort to be in your life. And number 3, the endless second chance. So if you have fallen victim to someone who always had an apology, right? So much so that maybe you thought that they were actually emotionally secure and in touch with their emotions, because whenever they did something wrong, heck, maybe they would even start to cry, and they would apologize, and they would let you know that they did something bad, and they would really, show that they understood that they hurt you. And then you may have noticed that as they cried and shared how much of an awful person they were to have done that to you, that you then felt compelled to now comfort them and let them know, no, they're not so bad. Oh, you forgive them. Oh, it's all right. You understand. It's from, oh yes, it's from that past relationship and that fear and them being rejected or being mistreated or right. And so then the whole experience starts to become about the other person. And instead of it being about them making amends to you and changing their behavior or starting to do the work, it then becomes all about their wound and you're comforting their wound. But because you have been conditioned, whether it's from, again, it could be just your culture or your society or your family's culture, to always give people a second chance, always forgive. It could be from your religious background, to always forgive people, always give them a second chance, especially when they show that they understand they did something wrong. They're repenting for their sins, and that's all that's needed. And actions don't matter, just words. When you have been conditioned to always give a second chance, you don't recognize this subtle manipulation happening. And especially if you've played a caretaker role in your family, or you've been parentified since you were a child, or you were the peacekeeper in your family, then you may rush and readily fall just right into this role. You're just so easily fall into this role and you act out the whole thing with this person again and again. Every time there's an issue, they cry or they really express their shame or guilt, and you go right into consoling them, and you feel better because you're psychologically wired to get a high from peacekeeping, right? And playing that kind of caretaker role. You get a kind of pleasure from playing that role because in a chaotic environment, if you can peacekeep or caretake, then that means the environments become more stable, and now internally you can feel more stable. So that's kind of what pulls us into that role, is we feel that we can't internally feel stable and at ease until the environment or the family or the workplace is stable and at ease. And so as soon as we're in that role now, making that person feel more stable and at ease and letting them know we forgive them, we're getting a good feeling. But we're not realizing that the good feeling is coming from us acting out the habit, right? Taking those steps of caretaking and peacekeeping, and not from an actual resolution, an effective resolution of conflict, and an effective commitment to change from the partner. And so you can see here, if you're wired in this way, where going in and kind of forgetting your hurt feelings and now taking care of this other person, that feels good to your nervous system because that's what you grew up in or what you've been conditioned into doing. You can see how it's kind of hard. It's going to be hard to prevent or to catch when an abuser is using this manipulation tactic on you. And so when we're so busy acting out that role that we've been conditioned to be in, and especially women are conditioned to play this role of caretaking, peacekeeping, kind of emotionally soothing everyone around them. When you're so focused on everyone else's feelings and stabilizing the emotional environment, and we're so focused on playing that role, we're not listening internally to ourselves. We're not listening to our intuition. We're not catching the internal alarm bells, and we're not honoring when our body is saying no, no, no. We're not honoring that, and we're not honoring, we may still have bad feelings afterwards, and resentment starts to quietly build, and we don't even can pinpoint that we're feeling resentment. Resentment can start to quietly build, but we won't even recognize that it's resentment, right? We might just think we're irritated, we're having a bad day. When we're acting out this loop, right, and we're getting that kind of pleasure high or feeling stability from bringing everything else under control, we're not able to pick up on what's emotionally happening in here and what is causing the emotional disruption that's still inside of us. And this is how this can be very damaging, because if you can't pinpoint, hey, I'm feeling X because of Y, how are you going to understand your relationship? How are you going to understand what you want? When we talk about not knowing what we want in relationships, not knowing what we want from life, trauma survivors can feel this. It's you can't even, something has been hijacked here where you are not allowed to connect your bad feeling with something bad. And so you just kind of feel lost in the fray. And so when we're having a good feeling associated with something bad, it becomes really tricky to trust ourselves again. And so for you, that process of surrendering to the hopelessness of like, I don't even know if I can trust myself in relationship again or trust others. Surrendering to that brings you to a place of kind of bare bones, and we kind of have to strip back and work with the most smallest of things, right? And build that trust back up brick by brick by brick. Can I trust that I like eggs in the morning? Let's see. Yeah, that is good. Can I trust that feeling that I need to be running 5 miles every day? 5 miles every day. Where did I get that number from? Oh, that's not coming from inside of me, but the desire to run is coming from inside of me. So I can start to parse these things out and see what actually feels good to me, but you get the point. For you, it'll be a slow process of building up that self-trust from the bottom up. And really learning to listen to your body and your emotions in real time. So even if you act out the people pleasing or caretaking, if you can start to recognize, what was I feeling before that? Yeah, I wasn't feeling good about that. And even in the midst of that habitual caretaking, what did I feel? Did that actually feel good? Or did I feel uneasy about that? Is this something that I've done again and again for this person and they've gone and hurt me again and again? Number 4 is the relationship that is so perfect on the outside that no one believes you when you're hurting on the inside. And so if you grew up in a family or in adulthood have been in an environment that largely prioritizes what looks good on the outside over the actual substance and internal experience, then you may have gone about dating in a very similar way, right? You're looking just for someone who is checking all the boxes, that has a good job, whatever you've been told to deem as a good job. If you're religious, someone who is also outwardly very religious, very devout. Maybe you were told to look for someone who of a certain status, who could bring a certain status to you or your family or match your status. And so in this scenario where all that matters is what's on the outside, then everyone in this dynamic is cultivating their inner sense of worthiness. They're actually drawing that from what's on the outside. So they only feel good about themselves if the outside looks good. And so from this frame of thinking, from this way of being, it's really hard to understand why you don't feel good if everything on the outside looks good. These are people who may tell you to just suck it up if you come to them and tell you about a partner mistreating you or abusing you. It's, well, but he pays all the bills. Oh, but he takes the family on vacation. Oh, but he comes around during the holidays and is very cheerful and we love having him around. Oh, but she's a wonderful mother to your children. And so they will value that person based off of small interactions and just the status or the appearances of what they bring to the family or the dynamic. And so any dissatisfaction you feel or any complaints that you have become a you problem. This is a problem that you're making up, that you're blowing out of proportion because you have everything else. Nothing else should matter to you. And so even if a person isn't being severely abused in this dynamic, or maybe it's not abuse that we typically categorize as abuse, right? Sometimes neglect gets blown under the radar or secrets are being kept, but you don't quite know what it is, right? It can feel very innocuous and not substantial enough to actually pinpoint and point a finger at and say, yes, this person did X, Y, and Z. And so when you don't have anyone who you can bring these feelings to, that actually compounds the feeling of isolation and helplessness and can really create a lot of damage. Because even more so than the bad experience, what can actually grade something as traumatic in our nervous system is not having safety on the other side, not having community on the other side, a safe place to land or people that we can go to. This kind of traumatic experience can be very hard to talk about because oftentimes, especially if you come from a well-to-do family or in comparison to other members of your family, you have access to more than they do. You can start to feel guilty for even acknowledging any hardship that you're going through. You feel like you're complaining, and so you never actually get to validate your experience. And this can happen at every income bracket. I'm not just describing a wealthy to-do family. This is also common in immigrant families, where the need to survive is so strong that the finer details get lost. The finer details being love and cultivating care within relationships and understanding each other on a deeper level that feels very small compared to needing to simply survive to live another day and being able to feed your family and feed yourself. And so in these situations, any dissatisfaction you're experiencing, even though it can become life-threatening and cause depression over time, all of that is minimized because, well, at least things look good on the outside and you have your basic needs met. And so if you were conditioned to put looks over everything and to put those kind of basics over everything, then it can be easy to find yourself in a situation where you chose and went about dating based off of these same criteria that you were given. And so I want you to know you could not have prevented these dating traumas, in my opinion. And I love to listen to a lot of psychologists and hear their experiences. And it always amazes me to hear just how many of them also fall victim to narcissistic abuse or find themselves in dissatisfying relationships. And so that to me is a reminder that you can know everything. You can know relationships inside and out, but based on how you have been shaped in your environment, still find yourself in a dynamic that is harmful. Especially when these patterns are instilled in you from a very young age, they become virtually invisible. It's like hard for you to personally detect, and even sometimes hard for someone on the outside to detect. It's usually only through the painfulness of going through some of these relationships and that internal suffering that we find the portal to something new. In this way, the route to healing isn't shaming yourself or putting yourself down about how you should have known better or blah, blah, blah. It's not about denying what happened to you. Instead, it's allowing the hopelessness, the pain, the suffering to shine a light on the more that is out there for you. Surrendering to your hopeless heart sounds terrifying, I know, but the hopelessness, it's not here for forever. But when we go up to it and we look at this immense darkness, we think it's going to be here forever. But what we're really doing when we acknowledge the hopelessness and we let it in is we are starting the grieving process. We're starting the process of acknowledging what we've been through, acknowledging the suffering and the trauma that we've been through, and we're starting to grieve. And by going through this process, something interesting happens. We start to notice that it's not necessarily all the relationships that are hopeless, but perhaps these relationships, right? It's actually hopeless to try to get love from someone who is similar to our caregiver, right? Who maybe was neglecting us, similar to our caregiver. And so in time, we start to see that experience as hopeless and not love overall as hopeless. The hopelessness is trying to teach you something, but it's likely not what you think it is if you are in the trance of fear. And when we start to shift this, we stop trying to get love from old dynamics. When we see that out there in the real world, we know that is not someone we should mess with. Let that person go on their merry way. I'm looking for love now in all the right places instead of looking for love in all the wrong places. And so I'm Unique Bell. This is what I would love to help you do. If you are afraid of that hopelessness in your own heart and you don't know how to approach it, I want to be your guide. I want to guide you through that experience, because as you surrender into that void, that darkness, that feeling of absolute aloneness, something truly enthralling happens. It's like you're suspended in deep space, completely alone. It's dark and it's empty. But as you lay in the void, you start to notice that the darkness starts to feel warm, almost like a hug, all around you. And slowly you become aware that you're not surrounded by darkness, that you're actually being held. You were never alone, ever. This is a spiritual experience. This is a reawakening. Your hopeless heart isn't trying to destroy you or condemn you to a life of solitude. It's actually trying to point you back home. And so I would love to be your guide. And so if you're finally ready to get on the other side of this, to stop cycling through the same patterns again and again, but actually pop yourself back out into a new reality where the love that you so desperately want can manifest with ease in your life, I would love to be your guide. See the link below to book a 60 minutes Soul Deep Lovers breakthrough session or claim a private coaching spot at uniquebell.com/coaching. You're not alone. You never were. There is real love waiting for you. If you like this message, go ahead and hit like and subscribe, and comment below which of these dating traumas resonated with you, and I'd love to support you in the comments, and also leave a positive message on someone else's post, and let's continue to support each other. I'll be back next week with a conversation on the power of identity in healing and manifesting. So hit subscribe, and I'd love to see you in that next video.